Yeah, absolutely.
Greatest guitar in the world, greatest player, and the such a drag.
Oh,
On a shirt or a jacket.
Dude, totally.
You're like, where the hell does that sound
Yeah,
come from? It's on a button.
yeah. Man, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Or in your sleeve, zippers.
yeah, buttons are a killer.
Well, I have a question actually. Okay, with acoustic guitars, do you ever use the internal pickup along with external mics?
I've used virtually every kind of way to get an acoustic I can think of. I haven't used a telephone yet, but I've thought about it. Hot dots, bridge pickups, built-ins, microphones inside, surface effect, bullets, you know, you name it. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And it just depends on what you're trying to do. You know, well, what sound you want to get.
Anybody want to answer that question about using the piezo built into electric acoustics? Do you like it?
People use it. Now, whether you like it or not is a different question, because if you think about it, it's an acoustic instrument. You want it to sound like an acoustic instrument, and a lot of the time those lines out, and the way the pickup's working, it makes it sound like crap sometimes.
Right.
I mean, not like, you know,
Right.
so a lot of times what I've seen people, I don't particularly like using it myself, but what I know I've seen engineers do is they take it, if they have it, and they mix it very lightly into the mix to add certain elements to it.
On bass, like upright bass in the rock environment, which is, you know, not exactly an acoustic guitar, but I've used that before to get the bass to come through, like the cable-y sound of the bass to kind of come through. I was gonna also say, you know, the Rolling Stones, like the jumping jack flash guitar sound. I just found out there was an interview with him. There's like a 335. It's not even a friggin' acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that? I know
That's a good tip for electric guitar recording too, is Nashville style, miking the strings.
Oh yeah. And Nashville tuning, sorry. Is that too crazy? That's a pretty cool thing too.
Yeah, no doubt. Love that. That's good for acoustics too. Yeah.
Yep.
Tell them what you're talking about with Nashville tuning.
It's well, the way I've been told what it is, because I just had a whole conversation with somebody about it. It's where you take like the high chorus of a 12-string guitar. So you string the bottom or the highest 3 strings as you would normally, and then the top strings are the high strings of that same set of strings from a 12-string guitar. So basically you end up with nothing but thin strings on the guitar. So when you're trying to get an electric acoustic guitar track to pop through kind of a rock track that's pretty heavy, like some of the more modern country tracks, you can play this thing and it's not going to like woof out or have a bunch of bottom end. It's like kind of useless on the track. It's as if you used a high pass filter before you recorded it.
Right.
That's cool.
That's a lot of sparkle and sheen. It's funny because I used to record in Nashville like a good bit. I'm from North Carolina, hence the twang. But this guy used to refer to this other version of that called the Murfreesboro tuning, which is right outside of right outside. Okay, right on. Where did you say?
MTSU, that's Middle Tennessee State
Yeah.
in Murfreesboro. So.
I recorded there once in that big drum room or whatever that.
Oh, when they had the Studer? Or?
It was an SSL. This is
we should not talk about this.
1990. Okay. Anyway, guy talks about using the E strings from an acoustic and doing the same thing and there's another version of tuning them all to the same note and doing another pass of the root or something.
Which we mentioned the piano thing earlier. You can do the same thing with acoustic guitar, tune to the key of the song, and then you stick a microphone in it. The way to use an acoustic guitar.
And have the whole room set up with guitars. So
electronic music.
Yeah, I did want to comment that if you're recording anything and you've got acoustic instruments sitting around in the room, they'll add to the recording all by themselves.
Yeah.
Without even trying. You know.
Good and bad, right?
Snare.
Sometimes great, yeah.
Sometimes it works. Usually it doesn't.
Going back to that piezo question. For me, 99% of the time, the piezo sounds awful. It's so high end and fake. I've heard some really good ones though, especially if they're coupled with Fishman. I think makes, or is it like a body simulation kind of pedal? That's really cool. And there's a plug-in that's made that does a similar thing. So I remember a client that had an Ovation, if you know what an Ovation, but this is a lower line Ovation, which is like a plastic body, like aircraft material kind of thing on the back, and a wooden facing with a piezo. And the piezo sounded like a piezo. It sounded really thin and didn't have any body and a lot of high end. And the guitar, acoustical, I was like, screw that, I'm going to mic it acoustically. Sounded awful. But the combination of the two sounded pretty good, so I wouldn't throw out the piezo right away or just rely on one or the other. You know, it's not bad to throw up a mic, but neither one of them sounded good together, and it got upgraded from awful to bad. So sometimes a couple of those is pretty useful. Anything else on acoustic? What about the difference in miking techniques in general? Steel string. Let's start with steel string. You know, anybody have any preferential miking techniques you go to for your strummy guitars versus picking or whatever?
Well, I tend to use two mics, one on the 12 string and one on the whole, and I angle it the whole one a little bit, you know, to kind of get rid of some of the booming and take a little bit.
And where is your whole mic? Where do you place that? Which end?
Well, if you got a right-handed guitarist, I put the whole mic over here pointing this way so that they don't bang it with their hand when
Right,
they play,
okay.
or go like that and knock it over.
Okay.
And
And your other mic at the 12th fret?
12th fret, it points straight in.
And which particular miking, what type of mics do you use for either one preference?
Well, cardioids usually, but sometimes I've tried it on Omni mic on the whole, and too much bass comes out of it that way. I don't like the sound of it. I don't know what other people want to do.
Right on. Any other miking preferences?
I've done a lot of mid-side, but that was because I didn't know what I was doing, and I decided that maybe I would know better later when I could like listen to it, isolate it. You know, I mean, like it's obvious you put the mic too close to the hole. A lot of times it's too boomy because you get too much body resonance. If you put it up by the strings, you get a lot of definition from the strings and the fretboard, and you hear all the auxiliary noises of physically playing a guitar. And then movement and all that other kind of stuff like makes it really difficult to do it well. But like we were saying earlier when we were talking about mid-side, the advantage is you can tune that sort of stuff. And in this particular case, it works pretty well because I mean, you can adjust the kind of ratio of left-handed fret moving stringiness to full body, fill out the whole frequency range of the instrument type of thing.
Yep.
In post, I mean, it's cheating almost.
I'm a big fan of another, I guess, I don't know if it's a natural technique that's kind of popular over there, is miking from the perspective of the player. You know, I like the over-the-shoulder mic. It's a really cool mic sometimes to try, because a lot of times the guitar and everything, he picks the guitar based on what you're hearing at your ear, you know, and the resonance and all that stuff is really cool. They're a pretty cool position to try get a lot of the body of the guitar, and if you aim it right, it's pretty cool. Sometimes a combination, depending on how you work with phase, getting the two can be pretty cool. But if you haven't tried the over-the-shoulder mic, it's pretty cool.
With what kind of mic?
I usually use a large diaphragm condenser, but I've had some luck with some STC small diaphragm guys too. So my favorite acoustic guitar jangly recordings were done with a single 57 into a Trident 80B, you know. Console just 57, dude, just sound killer. So, but if you want a lot of detail and stuff, often the 12th fret and some combination with the bridge of body is really cool. But over the shoulder things are really kind of a fetish.
Do you would you use the over the shoulder with just one mic, or would you always mic the front though too?
I'm one of those guys who doesn't mind overkill because the mute button's really easy to reach for, you know, but I'm always checking phase relationships between the two. So if I don't mind setting up extra mics and not having to run back and forth and say, well, let me try the 12th fret now. Okay, don't like that as much. Let me try this. I'll put up a few mics and go, okay, this is the one I like, and I'll either record them all or I'll commit to tape and say this is what I'm going to use, you know. But tracks are cheap. It's just, it can be annoying for the next guy if you've got 15, you know, snare drum mics and yada yada. But as a mixed guy, I kind of like having those because I might want to use the shoulder for the for the verse and then switch to something detail the different way for something else. But
the thing about the microphone for the, you know, it just got me out of a situation like a week or two ago where the guitarist was an electric guitar though, and he was complaining about how his amp didn't sound the same or anything. So I was watching him set his amp, And then when he would lean over the amp, I just stuck a mic right where his ear was, and then we went in the control room, and he was like, "That's great, I love
That's
it."
my sound.
That's like that's it. So
Totally, that's
sometimes you know, I mean, and if you looked at it, you'd be like, "That's dumb." But hey, I mean,
That's
tell
where
me how the
he adjusted
situation-
all the tone controls for that sound, you know. There you
Kept the
go.
client happy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the first time I've used it, so I'd say it's like one of those tricks that you can use in the back.
Mhm. That's great for, and there's a whole thing about live strings and stuff too, but
Oh yeah.
violins or wind instruments is walking around the room, you know, and figure out where it sounds really good, and trying to find a mic that sounds like what you're hearing, you know. Sometimes a 57 is going to be way off from that, you know. Might pick up something that sounds like what you're hearing and put the mic in that spot first, you know. Somebody had their hand up. What about nylon string guitars, finger style?
I like a big diaphragm, or maybe a ribbon mic, about 2 feet from the guitar.
Space.
Space.
Yeah.
New strings are usually good on that. They can get really dull depending on
Well, they
the
go
instrument,
fast,
I guess.
yeah. Usually strings like the nylon strings go really fast. They wear out fast.
Yep, for sure. Especially after a pizza dinner.
Somebody's been after it with a pick, and they don't work very well.
If you're doing roots reggae, you don't want those new strings at all.
That's true, yeah. Yeah. Nylon string roots reggae. What else on acoustic guitar? Any other comments, tricks? I'm glad you brought up the Nashville thing, because those things are cool to layer.
Another one from the live, I'm always sort of bringing that to my thing.
Great.
We had something on the Richard Thompson tour last year where the utility guy kept switching off between instruments. He'd play like baritone sax and flute, and then acoustic guitar. And acoustic guitar was only on some of the numbers, so we really didn't have a place to put a mic.
Yeah.
And we got a DPA, I just had to look it up, I had to remember it, the 4009G, there's a little clip on it,
Fits it on
attaches
mic.
onto the body of it with a little gooseneck.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it sounded good until the band's loud.
Right.
Then we had trouble on it, but in general, especially on the quieter songs, it sounded really good, and it was consistent because it clipped on.
Mhm.
It was just kind of coming out here, and the only spot we could get it. Sometimes you're limited to, you know, that's the only way to
Placement.
capture it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was much better than plugging in and taking off the pickup.
Mhm.
Or Overzilla saxophone player, the same mic actually works great.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What was that?
That little DPA, it's a little DPA clip-on mic. They have the piano ones too with the magnet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the clip-on mic for guys like
Right.
Kenny G. You can
Right on. So prepping for mix, or anything else on acoustic guitars you want to go into? I've been separating these things into recording, and then another BARMMAP event we'll maybe just talk about, you know, vocal mixing, you know, which is a different thing possibly. We talked about the recording, but anybody has any tips or tricks on acoustic guitar while we're still on it?
One comment, I tend to drill out the pick sound if they're using a pick.
Mhm.
And there's something about 220 hertz that I don't know what it is about that, but I use a parametric filter right there.
Mhm.
And it seems to
On different guitar instruments, like
Well,
different
mostly
acoustic, or the
just
same guy's guitar?
Just a acoustic guitar, when they're picking away on it, there's this thumping sound that happens right there at 220, and I kinda drill that out 2 dB.
Okay, and that's in your room or several rooms that you've experienced?
I've found that in 3 different places.
Okay.
I don't know if other people find that or not.
Something to look for straight away then.
Have you tried stereo miking on acoustic guitar?
I've done XY. I haven't done ORTF or Checkland disc or
Bloodline.
yeah, binaural. It's like a weird porn moment. What about your thoughts on that? Mr. brought that idea up.
Yeah, I've tried XY and midside and several different techniques, and yeah, it all depends on the situation. And I think the best thing, well, what I like to do is just put on a pair of headphones, and I'll go around and I'll just move the microphone, you know, as they're playing, and listen to what it sounds like, and then
That's huge.
you know.
Yeah, Actually, I've gotten a few tracks from Pete that I got to listen to what he tracked, and I always like getting stuff from him because he'll do like 5 different mic techniques on something, and I get to hear them all and go, this room sounds dope, and so, piano, bass, whatever. So